A stroke is the second leading cause of the death and the first leading cause of the disability. And by 2030, it is expected to be the most leading cause of the death, because other diseases like MI and cancer are having relatively better prognosis over a period of time. And 85% of the strokes are due to the cerebral infarction and 15% are due to the hemorrhage. And the one more worst thing about the stroke is nearly 30% of them have recurrence in the next 5 years. So every one of us know the history and routine diagnosis of the stroke. So I go directly to the management, and I have tuned my lecture considering majority of here are the non-neurologists. So like any other acute emergency, it is first most important is managing the airway, breathing and circulation. Cardiac monitoring is routinely not required in acute stroke except in selected patients. Once after securing the intravenous access, again in acute stroke, a routine oxygen is not required unless the saturations are less than 92% at the admission. The most important thing to be ruled out before any investigation is checking the blood glucose level, because the hypoglycemia can mimic a stroke, and this is one of the most common mimic of the stroke.
Excluding this.
Nil by mouth is routinely not required except if there is a significant dysphagia or a nasal irritation and impending aspiration. And dextrose containing fluids or excessive IV fluids will cause a raised intracranial pressure, so prefer to avoid at the admission. And as well, too low blood pressure, the suddenly reducing blood pressure like what we do in an acute MI situation is not to be done in acute stroke. And a good number of stroke mimics. Once these things has been excluded, the most important thing is for the confirmation of the stroke is the neuroimaging with the CT scan or MRI. Because of the financial constraints, most of the places here CT scan is being performed, and ideally an MRI will give much more information on the stroke. The blood glucose, electrolytes, routine complete blood picture, ECG are mandatory. American Heart Association advise routine markers for cardiac ischemia to be tested, but in our setup, hardly seen or noted anyone doing it as a routine fashion except in a selected situation. And in a selected situations, the liver function test to rule out whether there is an associated hepatic encephalopathy or a metabolic acidosis with the ABG, and to rule out aspiration with a chest X-ray, and EEG if we are considering epilepsy as manifesting this, like a Todd's palsy manifesting a stroke. And young stroke workup only in the selected patients, and the secondary workup for the stroke like Doppler neck vessels and lipid profile can be done at the convenience once the diagnosis is confirmed. The CT scan is almost available in, I can say, in almost all the taluk levels of the Andhra Pradesh. But the problem with the CT scan is in the first 12 hours, it is insensitive in detecting the small infarcts present in the cortical, subcortical, as well as the brainstem stroke. You can see this is the first few hours of the stroke, first 2 hours. There is no infarct in the scan, but you can see this white, this thing. This is nothing but the thrombosed middle cerebral artery. This also gives related to the prognosis. This indicates that there are complete MCA territory infarct. So you hardly see any infarct in this thing. If you can adjust the resolution of the scan and the console, sometimes you can pick infarct suspiciously. And an early infarct, though the infarct is so much is here, it can be missed unless it is seen carefully. And this is other patient where you can see thrombosed middle cerebral artery and CT angiogram showing the absence of flow in the middle cerebral artery. The MRI gives much more information on the anatomy of involvement and the angiography. Even a layman can identify a stroke here with the diffusion weighted MRI imaging, where we can pick up the infarct with 97% sensitivity and almost 98% specificity in the first 30 to 40 minutes after the onset of the stroke. Similarly, you can see the MR angiography, which takes another about 4 to 5 minutes, the paucity of vessels of the middle cerebral artery on the same side of the infarct. And sometimes the patient may be having a good number of infarcts, either silent or a symptomatic one. So this can be very difficult to differentiate whether he had which is an acute infarct. So MRI, diffusion weighted imaging can show the infarct very clearly. So once again, reassessing the routine things to be done. The next most important thing is looking at the blood pressure levels. If the patient has come within the first 4.5 hours and you want to thrombolyze, your blood pressure should be less than 185 by 110. So, and also if the blood pressure is, unless it is more than 220 by 120, we don't need to routinely reduce the blood pressure. But please continue the antihypertensives whichever the patient is taking. And from second and third day onwards, we can gradually reduce the blood pressure, say by 15 to 20% per day to the normal level. In the acute setting, to reduce the blood pressure, though books and the authorities mention labetalol as a commonly used medication, most of in our setting we use the sodium nitroprusside because of the availability and easy titration. Time is brain. 2 million neurons are lost each minute in stroke, and many patients rank it as a death as preferable to severe disability. No one wants to live nowadays with a disability. They prefer to die because of rather than suffering with the disability. So till about 2008, the thrombolysis, the window period is only 3 hours. At 3 hours, if we could thrombolyze these patients, there will be favorable outcome with respect to different scales of the improvement by 31 to 50% in compare with the placebo who had received, it is 20 to 38%. The risk of bleeding, though it is initially told as 6.4%, but the symptomatic actual bleeds are just 1.7%. In 2008, the ECAS study has shown even after 3 hours of thrombolysis up to 4.5 hours, it has maintained the same benefit at no additional expense in the hemorrhage. So now we are all practicing about up to 4.5 hours. In the last 1 year, we could thrombolyze about 20 patients in our hospital, which is the highest in the city, and out of which nearly 50% have come between 3 to 4.5 hours. This has definitely given an edge in the further thrombolyzing additional patients. So, and those who don't come within the 4.5 hours, because of a lot of reasons in our setup, up to 6 hours we can thrombolyze by intra-arterially through angiography going to the middle cerebral artery, and especially for the middle cerebral artery occlusion, and sometimes it has also been done for the basilar artery occlusion. We don't look at the recannulation rate. Recannulation is not equivalent to for the clinical recovery, and the recannulation is seen only in 2/3 of the patients, and the risk of bleeding here is much high at 10%. This is one of our patient who himself was a neurologist, could come in time with a stroke and showing the middle cerebral artery cutoff, because we could see in the angiography there is a complete occlusion at the middle cerebral artery. We went ahead with the intra-arterial thrombolysis and the recannulation was done, and he's doing his job. This is another patient with the left side involvement having MCA occlusion, and this is the post intra-arterial thrombolysis, the recannulation. By seeing the severity of the situation, everyone is tempted to use some heparin or anticoagulant, but anticoagulants are contraindicated because they increase the risk of the bleeding at no additional expense of recovery or prevention. The only indications for the anticoagulants in the stroke are the cardioembolic stroke because of the various reasons. That is the most common. The other common reasons are like coagulopathies due to various causes. A carotid or vertebral dissection is an optional indication, and symptomatic intracranial artery disease just prior to surgery, that is a carotid endarterectomy. And of course, CSVT is the a gold standard indication. If the patient has received thrombolytic therapy, we delay the aspirin for the first 24 hours, and Restal, at the earliest, he can take the aspirin. If not taking by mouth, at least by Ryle's tube feeding, we feed by the aspirin. Aspirin has been tried from 50 milligram per day to 625 milligram per day, and there is no difference in the prevention. Only because many of us use 325 milligram, because the largest stroke trial, international stroke trial, IST, has used 325 milligram. And 2 studies have come in the last decade with aspirin and dipyridamole, or the Persantin, the old drug revisited again, and after that again it is not seen in the picture. For the secondary prevention, again aspirin plus clopidogrel, just now Dr. Mohan was discussing, the match trial has showed there is an increase in the risk of bleeding. So the combination has been not used for the routine usage. And most of the drugs which are not used elsewhere, like US or UK, has been come to Indian market extensively, especially from the Chinese and Japanese markets. One of them is citicoline, the other is edaravone, the so-called neuroprotective drugs. They've shown variable response. The official guidelines doesn't give a green signal for its usage, but it's been extensively used in our society. And there are certain things which have definitely no role, is the so-called hemodilution or volume expansion, the pentoxifilin, that is our commonest Trental, piracetam, or the nootropill, nimodipine, flunarizine, hydralazine has absolutely no role in our stroke management. In addition to the acute management, general care, the nutrition, hydration, management of these infections, preventive measures for the DVT and pulmonary thromboembolism are very important in the stroke. When it comes to transient ischemic attack, the definition of a transient ischemic attack is reversible within 24 hours. The brain has nothing to do with the sun movements. So we don't consider TIA as anything, something different in the management. It has same risk factors, it has the same incidence of the recurrence. So we all treat as a TIA just because he's a lucky fellow and the stroke fellow is a little unlucky fellow. And the management is the same. And the RIND, for no reason, they kept 1 week duration. 10 to 20%, regarding the most common cause of the death in stroke in the acute period is the cerebral edema coning, which is seen in around 10 to 20% of the anterior circulations. And as I shown, the MCA dense artery sign, they are all poor prognostic signs. So in these patients, the mannitol or the glycerol is the commonly used. Steroid is a controversial and hardly people are using. Hyperventilation only in selected situations. The 3 things which has changed the stroke management in the last decade is, one of them is a good intensive care setup, second thing is the thrombolytic therapy, and the third one is the decompressive craniectomy. Here the part of the cranial bone is been removed for the allowing the brain, the swollen brain, to expand outward rather than inward, causing the compression on the brainstem. Especially if it is done within the first 48 hours in a patient who is worsening in the level of consciousness and with maintaining Glasgow Coma Scale of more than 7, it is one of the good tool for improving the mortality as well as morbidity. The other thing is the carotid disease. Unlike in most of the textbooks which is mentioned, nearly 20 to 30% of the strokes are due to the carotid artery disease. But in our Indian setup, it constitutes less than 5%. So in our setup, we hardly people perform the endarterectomies or carotid stenting. And in asymptomatic, it's called symptomatic or asymptomatic if they have the stroke or no stroke. And significant, we use the word when there is more than 70% stenosis of the carotid artery. Here you can see a critical stenosis of the internal carotid artery at its origin. In last 1 year, this is one of the highest number in the Andhra Pradesh. We have done around 18 carotid endarterectomies, out of which 16 were symptomatic. In 2 patients we did because they were going for the CABG with a critical stenosis, simultaneous CABG with the carotid endarterectomy. Bilateral disease was there in the 6, and there was a significant difference between the male and female population, 15 versus 3. And we had only one single local hematoma, and one patient had 9th and 10th palsy on the same side. And this is one interesting data on the secondary stroke prevention. I don't want to take a long time, just at the fag end of the meeting. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Doctor, for your lucid lecture on management of acute stroke. Now I request Dr. Buddhisagar Reddy to present a memento to Dr. Chandrasekhar Reddy.